Now let us now transition over to gait. What exactly does this concept involve? You will notice that a lot of professional dancers and high fashion models, also yoga instructors, especially those who practice a lot of back bends, Pilates instructors as well. When they walk, the rotation of their rib cage and pelvis has already disappeared. Normally, when we walk, with each step, if you look at me standing like this, at this moment, my rib cage rotates to the left while my pelvis rotates to the right. In other words, while I'm walking in this state, my hip joints are also rotating. For example, right now my left hip joint is externally rotated and my right hip joint is internally rotated. So my upper body rotates, my midsection rotates, and then my hip joints rotate as well. At this point, I move forward, maintaining forward propulsion. However, if your posterior mediastinum is compressed and your thoracic spine is locked in an extended position. So, what happens to models in this situation? Models will experience excessive pelvic rotation because they walk in a straight line. Therefore, their upper body basically remains still, so the lower body moves like this. That's why there's a lot of twisting in the lower body. So, as they listen to the music and the beat, it basically goes like this. It's basically just like this. So when you keep walking back and forth like this, you end up twisting and loosening the lower part of your waist, making the L5S1 intervertebral disc unstable, which can easily lead to problems. With all this twisting, you're using your fascia and deep muscles much more, so it's easy to develop snapping hip. And when you twist and step in a straight line, each step puts more pressure on the big toe area, making it easy to develop hallux valgus, or bunions. A lot of models have hallux valgus and snapping hip because their upper body doesn't rotate. They're required to maintain a certain poise so their upper body stays still, but their lower body moves. There's another situation that can happen. Neither the upper nor the lower body twists. That is, my upper body doesn't rotate and my pelvis doesn't rotate either. In this case, what happens? The toes end up turning instead. Both toes are pulled inward, so the inward pigeon-toed stance becomes very pronounced. When you walk pigeon-toed like this, neither the upper nor lower body rotates. They compensate by using the tibia, using internal rotation of the lower leg, which is not good. In other words, people like this have walking problems, knee pain, or pain on the inside of the big toe caused by hallux valgus. Even the impingement of the hip joint may be related to the compression of the posterior mediastinum. Now, this person's posterior mediastinum compression is not because they have completely lost the ability to rotate. When we walk, how many degrees does our thorax rotate? 4 to 5 degrees. So even if your posterior mediastinum is compressed, you can still rotate up to 5 degrees. So why do people with posterior mediastinum compression stop rotating? It's because they've been in an extended position for a long time, continuously sending this signal to their brain. Their thoracic vertebrae are no longer used to rotating, and the spinous processes of their thoracic vertebrae are stacked together. As a result, they're no longer accustomed to the movement of rotation. But that doesn't mean it doesn't have the function of 5 degrees of rotation. That's not the case. You can also understand it this way. After the thoracic vertebrae gets stuck in extension during the growth period, the proprioception of the thoracic segment becomes impaired. So it turns into a habit of getting stuck in the extended position, because the more you extend, the less you can rotate randomly. If you rotate carelessly, you'll get injured or misaligned. Therefore, the straighter your thoracic curve is, the less you rotate when you walk. If you don't rotate when you walk, then either your pelvis rotates excessively, or your hips rotate excessively, or your toes rotate excessively. In short, some part has to compensate. As a result, over time, the work that should have been done by your thoracic vertebrae or pelvis is all shifted downward, and eventually, your lower body gets damaged. So after your lower body is damaged, trying to fix the lower part alone won't work. This is also what traditional Chinese medicine refers to as treating lower body problems from above. You need to unlock the upper part and restore its rotational function. In other words, with every step we take, multiple parts of the body are writing the same character, a horizontal figure 8. It's always like this, always moving in this way, always moving like this. That's how I can move forward. So for someone with a straightened thoracic curve and compressed posterior mediastinum, if this member wants to lose fat, you shouldn't have them use the treadmill because they're very prone to injury. It's easy for them to experience hip or elbow impact or snapping, and their knees are likely to develop pain. They're very likely to encounter a whole series of such problems. because the coordination between their thoracic spine and pelvis and the rotational function is inhibited. So you first need to find a way to restore their proprioception. That's why I teach you the Vajra pose. First, to create the thoracic curve, and second, to provide continuous stimulation during the impact. That part is to help you restore proprioception in that area. The Vajra pose can quickly restore proprioception in your thoracic spine. Once your proprioception is restored, your brain knows where your thoracic spine is, so it can control it. If it's usually stuck and doesn't move at all, over time I lose control over that area. I don't even know where it is anymore. So if I don't know where you are, how can I get you to move? That's the relationship between them, and it's also related to walking. That's why, whether it's dancers, yoga teachers who've practiced for a long time, or Pilates instructors, you'll rarely find them enjoying running marathons. As long as you do too many back bends or stretching movements, people who have compressed their posterior mediastinum generally don't like running or walking too much. That's because you'll feel uncomfortable. You might experience rapid breathing, shortness of breath, or other discomforts. Or you might feel really unwell the next day after running. So, many people just don't like it. It's not that you don't like it, it's that your body currently isn't able to handle these activities. Alright, moving on. People with posterior mediastinum compression are actually not suited for playing golf, because golf requires very good rotational function of the thoracic spine. If your thorax can't rotate, it's because you're stuck in an extended position. So at this point, after you swing, you either rotate with your pelvis, or with your hips, or with your knees, or with your lower back. That's why many people experience lower back pain, hip pain, or pain on the inside of the knee after playing golf. In these cases, it's also related to compression of the thoracic spine. The thoracic vertebrae are stuck together. I've seen this happen very often among people who play golf. This is what's referred to as lumbar muscle strain and hip impingement. For many executives, I start by addressing the thoracic spine to help them improve. Basically, for 90% of my clients, except for foreign clients, I hardly ever touch the area where they feel pain, yet the symptoms in those painful areas disappear. Do you want to understand the underlying principles behind this? When there's compression and you choose certain types of exercises that aren't really suitable for your condition, then for people with significant compression, playing tennis isn't really appropriate either, because it also requires rotational movements, which can easily lead to injury. Another important aspect is breathing. Generally, people with posterior mediastinal compression tend to have a relatively higher breathing rate, and their resting heart rate is also relatively higher. Additionally, for those with posterior mediastinal compression, every time they take a breath, their sternocleidomastoid and scalene muscles contract excessively. This is why many women who never do housework or physical labor often have such tight necks. Because you can't expand front to back and you can't expand side to side, you can only expand up and down. So you have to rely even more on vertical movement, which is why your neck becomes very tight. Next, let's talk about people who are emotionally out of control. The most worrying situation is when both posterior mediastinum are compressed and both scapulae are winged, and then the couple forms a pair. This is the most dangerous. When these two people are together, even a little spark can set off an explosion. Look, this is their sternocleidomastoid muscle, this is their platysma, and this is their scalene muscle. All of these are extremely tense. In this situation, if you want to help them regain emotional control, you need to stabilize their breathing and heart rate. Only when the breathing and heart rate are stabilized can their emotions become stable.